Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for another day we have spent with you. We thank you for bringing us here this evening to continue to learn more about health. We pray that you will be with those that are still on their way here, that you'll protect them, allow them to join us as soon as they can, and be also with those that are watching, that it will be also a blessing to them. Be with Dr. Miller as he presents another topic to us today. Bless him and bless us all. May we have a wonderful time learning, and help us not just to learn, but also to put into practice in our own lives and share with those around us who also need help. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
How many of you like taking tests? You hate it. Well, you know, the real test isn't what we just did just now. The real test is going to come one of these days when somebody's sick and they need help. So it puts a little bit more, you know, the Babylonian way of thinking is you take a test, you pass the test, you get a piece of paper, you hang it on the wall, and you get letters before or behind your name. That's not the test. The test is when you're really facing a real life situation, what are you going to do? Is like Marco, he's been involved in some operation, this exercise in his office last couple of days. And that's fun. If someone makes a mistake, no big deal. But when it finally really happens for real, that's when it's going to really make a difference. So we're talking about aging and dementia. But I don't like that title, never have liked that title, because I want you to get something in your mind. Old age is not a disease. We treat it like a disease. We expect people to get sick when they get old. And most of the time they do, because it's accumulation of bad habits over the decades finally catches up with you. When you're young, you can do all kinds of stuff and it never bothers you. But one of these days it will catch up. But when you think about aging and dementia, how many know this guy right here? Dr. Hinohara. Pretty amazing guy. He just died, 2 years ago. 105 years old. He wrote 150 books from the time he turned 75. Yeah, 150 books from the time he turned, that means in 30 years, he wrote 150 books. The guy's an amazing person, I can't understand it. But here's one thing that young people, and we got some young people here, young people got to realize that it doesn't take very long to get old, does it? It happens. You see, once you get old and you look back and say, whoa, how did I get here so fast? It just goes so fast. You know, I'm a Christian, and so it doesn't bother me because I know that this is just a test. Graduation's coming soon when you get into eternity. But the bottom line is, it's not that you're getting old is the reason why your brain's falling apart. It's some type of damage that's happened in your brain. Accumulation of, like I've already mentioned, you realize that every time a cell in your body divides and the DNA transcribes, it picks up 1 to 4 mutations. They normally show up on the skin. A lot of them show up on the skin because our skin cells replicate about every 28 days. But we start to accumulate damage as we go through our lives. You know, I showed you last night the average life expectancy of Japanese, and they're #1 in the world as far as a nation is concerned. But there's a group of people who have a much better life expectancy and even a healthy life expectancy. And you know who that might be? Seventh-day Adventists. The average Seventh-day Adventist woman, 89.6 is her life expectancy, and for men, it's 87. So it's pretty important, the life that you live. My recommendation is we develop a exercise program. We talked a little bit about exercise last night. And one thing I just thinking about right now, we'll be talking about some of this a little bit later in another program, is the fact that when you exercise, your body produces lactic acid. Matter of fact, if you haven't exercised for a long time, and then you exercise real hard. Have you ever done that and you feel that pain all over your body? That's like buildup of lactic acid. Well, lactic acid really is good. You know what lactic acid does? It takes the heavy metals out of your body. You got any heavy metals in your body? Got any mercury, aluminum, lead, cadmium? We got all that stuff accumulating in our bodies. And I'm going to be showing you ways we can take it all out of our body. Matter of fact, there's one particular program, you can have it all out in 3 weeks. But you got to do the program. Anyway, exercise. I mentioned something else about exercise last night in relationship with mitochondria. Remember mitochondria? The more we exercise, the more we produce mitochondria. And I mentioned last night that there's 2 things that scientists agree on how to extend our longevity. One was mitochondria, how many mitochondria you have. And the second one was Hirahachibu. Restriction of caloric intake helps you to live longer. It's sometimes hard to do, isn't it? We're going to be looking at a few studies tonight. Here's one. They took 265 people for 1 year, all right? And these were 2 different types of people. One, they had normal brain function. Another, they already had some deterioration in their brain function. We're talking about going into dementia, Alzheimer's. I don't like to call it Alzheimer's no matter who has it because there's really no definitive diagnosis of Alzheimer's outside of an autopsy. And so anyway, whatever it is what it is. But they put these people on an exercise program. A half hour of exercise a day for 5 days a week for 1 year. And they had significant reversal in dementias, in progression. Matter of fact, 70% had regression in their dementias just from 30 minutes a day. Not much to ask of a person. Another interesting study had 59 healthy but sedentary people living in a retirement type of a center. They divided them into 2 groups. I don't like the 2 groups things because one group's always going to catch it in the shorts, the other one's going to do really fine. But they put one on an aerobics program. Another, does anyone not know what aerobics is? Aerobic is when you get your heart rate and your respiration rate both increased. The other was on a stretching program. The stretching program's good. We should always do stretching before we do the aerobics, before we do our exercise. They did this, let's see, I forget how long the thing was. It wasn't a very long program, but here's what happened. The people who were taking the aerobic exercise program, this was something like 6 weeks, had great improvement in their brain, in the white matter and in the gray matter. The ones who were doing the stretching, no improvement in their brain function. So we've really got to do we got to get down there. Matter of fact, another study, this is done, I think, at University of Washington. If people who get out there and start exercising, even if they already have some deterioration in their brain function, if they start moving their bodies, exercising, walking, riding a bike. Now, the study said yoga. I don't like including yoga in there because there's some good things about yoga, but there's far more bad things about yoga. But they improved their brain function, their intelligence, their retentiveness, just from getting out and getting some exercise. I like this one, this study right here. Aerobic exercise. Of all the ways of growing your brain, it's twice as strong as any other program they can find to grow your brain function is aerobic exercise. Getting your heart rate and your respiratory rate up, not bad. But there's another thing you can do, and that's called multitasking while exercising, or exercising and doing something else. That's multitasking. I used to do this. At one time I was working for a doctor out in the countryside, and every day I'd take a long bike ride, about 2-hour bike ride. Before I left, I'd pick up a little stack of Bible memory cards, and I'd be riding down this country road, and I'd glance at a verse, and I'd glance at a verse. I'd have them all memorized by the time I got back, and they all had come together. I could have preached a sermon on it. But basically, if you are While you're exercising, you're also training your mind. It's going to be much, much better. There's another thing that's going to affect your brain, and that is homocysteine. Now, homocysteine is an amino acid, a sulfur-containing amino acid that is found in high quantities in meat products. And here's what they found out. High levels of homocysteine associated with coronary heart disease and Alzheimer's disease. It doubles the risk of both of them. Homocysteine. Matter of fact, here's the study goes on and says, for every 10% elevation in your homocysteine, your risk of heart disease increases 10%. So that's, and where do we get homocysteine? Meat. You're going to be eating the animal products. So you basically, it's going to be caused by two things: a high meat diet and a low fruit and vegetable diet. That's where it's at. What's the best diet? All fruit and vegetable diet. Yeah, it's good. I didn't know there's 29 Kentucky Fried Chickens. Maybe I quit eating Kentucky Fried Chicken too soon, because that's 1984. I'm glad I quit. Another very interesting study, there's something about the nerves and our fingertips that if we stimulate them, it helps stimulate the brain. Matter of fact, here's what they say: learn to knit, learn to use chopsticks. Studies show that engaging in a concentrated area of the nerve at the end of your fingers stimulates brain growth. So my recommendation is we do something with our fingers. One thing that we've learned in studies of people who are involved in music, and most music requires fingertips, right? Violins, cellos, trumpets, pianos. It's something about their minds. They're just different minds. They're very strong minds. So I would recommend we get into some type of a musical program, because there's something good about music too. We can continue to grow our brains into our 60s, 70s, and 80s and beyond. So we're going to look at some of the functions of what is memory. Memory is basically putting things in your brain that you can recall at a later time. Now, right now, everything you're hearing, everything you're seeing, everything you're feeling is being recorded in your brain, right? Everything is there. They've done studies. They've taken probes and probed somebody's brain, and they hit a spot, and they activate the probe, and the person is 50 years ago on the beach with whatever they were doing that day, and they can see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, and feel it. It's all there. It's all in your brain. It's just what we do with that memory. So I'm glad we don't have to deal with all of it every day. We have a thing called short-term memory. Right now, everything I'm saying is going into your short-term memory. And that's a good thing. When you get introduced to somebody and they tell you their names, that's totally short-term memory. For some people, it is so short, you can't remember it after you shake their hand. I was at Parris Island, South Carolina one time, and we were having a reception at the commanding general's house. I was in charge of a group of educators that I was taking on this tour of Parris Island. And we went into his house, the general standing here, his aide is standing here. He would ask your name and he'd introduce you to the general. General, this is Captain Miller. He'd shake my hand, evening, Captain Miller. 80 people. When we left that night, he said goodnight by our names. Wow. He only heard them one time. 80 names. He had developed that. You can develop your mind to do anything you want to. Phone numbers, they say basically we can only remember 7 numbers in a short span. I try to practice something as I'm driving down the road and a car passes me. I try to glance at the license plate and then repeat the number just from a glance. Anything you can do to train your brain, make your brain work. And we can usually do 7. Then we got area codes in front, that gets it up to 10. Anyone ever heard of a savant? Yeah, savant. There's one guy, matter of fact, there is a type of autism called Asperger's. And basically Asperger's is basically a very high-functioning autistic person who is basically in the savant category. And I watched this guy. He memorized pi. You know pi, 3.14, blah, 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 blah. He memorized it to 25,000 characters. And I think in 2 weeks. And then they took him to Iceland. He had a grammar and a vocabulary book. In 1 week, he was fluent in Icelandic, one of the toughest languages there is. Very interesting what the mind can do. We consider these people brain damaged. No, I only wish. How about your passwords? You ever, if you forgot your password, check here. You click there and you go and you get the link and you go in there. Now come up with a new password. You come up with a new password, type it in, and you send it off and produce it and say, what was that password now? Yeah, it happens. How many passwords do we have in our life right now? 20, 30 passwords? How about where you put your car keys? I tell people, here's what you do. If you're always losing something, your glasses, mine are right here. Here's what you do. When you lay them down, you say it out loud. I'm putting my car keys here. Better yet, have a place you always put your car keys. We got to get into good habits because our minds are going to forget. Now we have other type, long-term memory. These are very personally meaningful events that we have in our lives. I remember the night that my daughter was born. My daughter's going to be here in 2 weeks with me. It's going to be pretty exciting. I try to forget the time I was married. But graduating, these things, once they're in your mind, they're there. There's others that you had to memorize. The multiplication table, your kanji, the periodic table. I don't know anyone's got the whole thing memorized. But there's certain things that we sit down typing. You had to go through the home row, type. And now you just sit and it just happens because it's in your long-term memory. It's pretty nice. And then there's extremely significant events. Now, many of you aren't old enough to remember when Kennedy was assassinated. I walked home with Brad Piner. I was in Mr. Pitcher's botany class when it was announced. I remember everything about that day because that was a significant event when Kennedy was assassinated. In July 1969, I was at my university where I was going to school with my girlfriend Betty, and I remember everything about the time when Neil Armstrong says, one small step for man, one great leap for mankind. And I remember very much my mother called me one morning and she says, do you know what's happening? I says, no. She says, go find a television and find out. Something's happening in New York. None of us will forget where we were, what we were doing when we saw those Twin Towers go down. Those things are riveted in our minds, and it's just the way it happens. But memory is basically a three-stage event. Now, for those significant events, there's no stages. It goes straight into long-term memory, and it will be there till the day you die. My uncle was at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 41. He remembers everything about that day. It's just where it was. My mother remembers when it happened because her brother was at Pearl Harbor and she was still in high school. She remembers everything about that day. We have those days. But we've got to, when we're trying to memorize something, we've got to concentrate on it. That's our problem. We don't concentrate anymore. We just let things flit into our mind and flit right out. As we concentrate on something, we cut neural pathways through our brain. It's sort of like Western Kentucky University. They built a lot of new buildings. One thing they did not build was sidewalks. No sidewalks. Why didn't they build sidewalks? They wanted to see where the people were going to walk. And the people made paths. And then they put the sidewalks there. Otherwise, you put the sidewalk here, the people are going to go through the grass anyway. And so the more we walk in that thing, the more it gets into our minds. We sit there and embed it into our mind by repetition. It's very important. In school, and you can see some people are completely zoned out. They're not concentrating on what's going on. They're concentrating on everything else in the world. Children are very good at that. We call it going in one ear and out the other. We've got to learn to concentrate. Now, I like this saying right here. This is another study right here. Alzheimer's patients who meditated 12 minutes a day had significant improvement in their memory. Anything wrong with that statement? The word meditate. See, there's different types of meditation. There's this type of meditation. What's the whole purpose of that type of meditation? Empty your mind. Get it completely empty. That's not what we're talking about. It is getting your mind around something bigger than yourself. And you meditate upon that thing. And you think hard. 12 minutes a day. Do you all have 12 minutes a day? That's pretty easy. If you concentrate on something big, 12 minutes a day, your brain's going to get stronger. Now, this is talking about people with Alzheimer's disease. Do you think it would also work with somebody whose brain is functioning quite well? It will make it stronger. But here's the problem right here. You got to go home and do it. It's one thing to put it in the notes. It's one thing to have it in short-term memory and even transfer it to long-term memory, but we've got to start doing some of these things. What did this meditation accomplish? It increased cerebral blood flow to the frontal lobe. What was the second golden pillar? We talked about 3 golden pillars last night. First one was the life that was in the blood. The second one, perfect health requires perfect circulation. And if you do not have perfect circulation in your brain is not going to work right. So we can, focusing, meditating for 12 minutes will increase cerebral blood flow, but there's a couple of other things you can do. One is to drink more water. Why? Your brain is 85% water. Your plasma is 93% water. So if we drink more water, our blood is less viscous, it can flow better. But there's an herb very popular up in mainland Japan, and that is called ginkgo biloba. Any ginkgo here in Okinawa? Ginkgo increases cerebral blood flow. It's what we always give patients who have any mental problems. We're giving them ginkgo biloba. So we got to concentrate. The second thing is we got to organize. Get things orderly in our mind. How do we get things organized? We talked last night about some things. We have to get enough sleep, 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. But we talked about the current trends in sleeping. Adults, an hour and a half less than their grandparents slept. Children, 2.5 hours less than children were sleeping in 1962. Something's going wrong with our minds. This is going to have a profound effect upon our minds. You're getting a lot of short-term memory tonight. If you go home and you go to bed like you should, all that short-term memory is going to be put in a nice, neat place for easy retrieval. That's if you go home and you go to bed. And so basically tomorrow morning, it's like a neat file cabinet. Everything's there. You can find it a whole lot easier. But on the other hand, all the short-term memory you're getting right now, if you go home tonight and decide you want to do this, that, and the other thing, well, where's that short-term memory going to go? Those of you who have a PC computer, have you ever defragged it? That's what your brain looks like. All those files, those pieces of files, all in your brain, and you cannot consolidate that. You got to get them organized because you wake up tomorrow morning and looking like this. An interesting study was done. 2 groups of people. One group, they gave a class in the morning. They gave a test 12 hours later that evening. The other group, a class in the evening, 12 hours later, a test in the morning. The ones who'd slept on it had better grades, higher scores, because when you're sleeping, 9 o'clock, consolidating that short-term memory, human growth hormone we're producing starting at 9 o'clock, human growth hormone takes short-term and puts it in the long-term. So therefore, we got better functioning minds. All right, so we got concentration, we got organization, and then we got the hard part, especially when you took algebra. That's retrieval. Where did X go? I have no idea who X was, and why X went, I have no idea. But, we got to be able to retrieve this thing. And basically, that's that neural pathway. The more you put it in there, you're going to be getting that pathway, and you'll be pulling these things back up into your mind. Okay, some of the causes of dementia: defective chemical and electrical functioning of the brain nerve cells. You know, our brains work by chemicals. Matter of fact, our entire nervous system. You got electrical down to the ends of the boutons, and then you got chemicals going in, and how that works, to me, is I can't even fathom how people can think that thing evolved the way we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Okay, the other one, injury to and or death to brain cells. And we do that in many different ways. Matter of fact, Muhammad Ali, I was going to call him Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, and many of the people who were boxers, and matter of fact, it's a big thing with football players now, all getting brain problems as they get older because of all the trauma they took to their brain. And it's going to, payday comes someday. But there's another thing. We can't avoid all brain damage. I had that bicycle wreck I mentioned last night, 6 years ago. Besides 7 broken bones, I had 9 holes in my head. I really took a beating on that when I hit the ground. But I'm already crazy to make any difference. But here's some of the causes, I think, of some of the real damage to our brain today. One is our environment, especially all the pollution that we have. Let's go down a really short list here of things that are having profound effects upon our brains today. Pollution, yes. I run in the morning when I run down, was that Highway 81? 81. I hate to do it because all those vehicles go by and you're breathing in their exhaust. It's all pollution. And I know it's not good for me, but I got to run. Another one is all these medicinals, especially the immunizations that they're putting into our bodies. There's some real problems here. I don't know what you think about that, but I think you need to be very careful. Another one is the media that we're surrounded with. And it's getting worse. It's going to get worse really bad because now they're coming up with, what? G5. You thought G4 was bad. Where did they start shooting G5 at you? How can that not affect your brain? It's going to affect your brains. Chlorinated and fluorinated water. Do they do that here in Okinawa? They chlorinate and fluorinate? Since it's an American island, just about probably does. These things are bad for your brain, bad for your body. Cancer rates go way up with chlorinated water. We need to find a better way to get around that. Microwave ovens. You cannot put something you're going to eat in there and cause an oscillation of the atoms at 1 billion times a second and not knock the fire out of the DNA. And then you're going to put that strange DNA into your body that the body's never seen before. That's what we call an allergen. I wouldn't even have one in my house. And then we got the foods that we have today, the processed foods. Artificial colors, artificial flavors, artificial preservatives. But there's a new one. It's not so new anymore, but it's something that's really, really going to have a major impact. Now, I'll name a book that you need to read. It's called Seeds of Deception by Jeffrey Smith, and that is genetic modification of organisms. That, my friends, is going to cause huge problems in our environment. I could get into a big theological discussion on that. We won't do that. But as much as you can, stay away from GMO.
What was the book called?
Huh?
What was the book called?
Seeds, like corn, it's seeds that you plant, Seeds of Deception. And you read the book, the guy, he makes the argument that you cannot controvert. It's an amazing book. There's a lot of great books. Oh, yeah, let's go on here. Another study, this was Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons. This guy wrote a book called 50 Shades of Kale. And this is what he says. Comparing the diets of today with diets 100 years ago. And here's what they've discovered at the University of Columbia and I think a Chinese university. They're finding that the brains of people on the modern day diet are shrinking. Yeah. We need to get back to getting the old way of eating. That's why I really like going to Eastern Europe where people are poor because They can't afford fast foods. I go to some countries that they don't have a McDonald's, don't have a Kentucky Fried Chicken. You're going to eat potatoes, you're going to eat cabbage, you're going to eat onions, you're going to eat garlic, you're going to eat whole bread. Yeah, that's a good, healthy place to go. Diabetics increase risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. What kind of disease? All right, we're going to talk about diabetes on Thursday night, but let me just ask this right now. There's two main types of diabetes. What are they? Type 1, type 2. What type of disease is type 1? All right, why? Body does not manufacture insulin because it's an autoimmune disease. You destroy the islets of Langerhans that produces the insulin. It's an autoimmune disease. Type 2 is a metabolic disease or an endocrine disease. All right, so there are two different diseases that are affecting us in pretty much the same way. We're having a hard time getting glucose into the cell. But type 2 is a lifestyle disease. And you can cure type 2 diabetes, and you can certainly prevent it. Okay, another thing that's affecting us today is all the aluminum in our systems. I'm not going to ask who use antiperspirant deodorants, but you know how they make them to be antiperspirants? It's mercury. Aluminum, I'm sorry, not mercury, aluminum. And first of all, you do not want to use an antiperspirant. How many kidneys do you have? 2. Really? I got 3. You got 1? Okay. Well, I've got my 2 back here, and then I got the one that covers my body. Your skin is an excretory organ. It gets rid of toxins. And when you make your underarms quit sweating, they don't detoxify, and then we start getting swollen lymph nodes. You don't want antiperspirants. Stick a cotton sock under your arm if you have to sop up the extra water. I've already mentioned a little bit about the immunizations. There are so many things in there. You see, the virus that they've put in there that's going to fight whatever it is or whatever they're making the immunization for, sometimes it's the bacteria, it's just a tiny bit of it. They got to have something else in there, so they put all these other things in there. Why do they put things like mercury in there? Mercury adheres to nerves. And that's what they're trying to work on sometimes, the nervous system. It sort of hangs on there. But you do not want mercury hanging on to your nerves. So I mentioned one way to get rid of heavy metals. What way was that? Lactic acid, exercising. Well, here's some other ways. Pectin. You want to eat more pectin. Where do we find pectin? The skins of fruits and vegetables, carrot skins, apple skins. But one way I like to do it, notice in the picture, there is an orange that's partially peeled. Let me see if I can get that thing. There, it doesn't show up. Peel the color off your orange and eat all that white stuff. The white stuff is pectin. Sunflower seeds have pectin. These things latch on to mercury, aluminum, and lead and take them out of your body. How about cilantro or coriander? Some people call it coriander. 400 milligrams of this stuff a day. This is what I talked about before. This they've found will take all the heavy metals out of your body in 3 weeks. Now, I don't know if it's really going to do that, but I tell you what, as soon as I get home, I'm going to get myself a bunch of cilantro. Now, one thing about cilantro is something you got to get used to. You got to sort of back into slowly because it's a pretty strong flavor. If you're from south of the border in Mexico, not a problem. That's what you've been living on. But if you don't like it, if it just makes you sick to your stomach, eat parsley. It takes out mercury. And also your cruciferous vegetables. They all will take out the heavy metals, will help you. We call it chelation. Will help take these things out. Another one is high fiber foods. Where we find fiber? Fruits and vegetables. We don't find them in animal products. Fiber also takes cholesterol out of your body. Fiber also helps keep your colon clean. Fiber does so many good things. Another thing we need, we're talking about the brain now, is niacin, vitamin B3. They did a study on niacin and Alzheimer's risk. 3,700 older adults, they did this study for 6 years. And here's what they found. Those who had a low niacin diet had a high Alzheimer's result. Whoa. Those who had a high niacin diet had very low instance of Alzheimer's disease, by 40 to 70% less. That's a significant number. That's worth me going out and buying myself some B3. Now, where are you going to get your B3? Oh, other things it does. It maintains the DNA and nerve functions in your brain. That's what matter of fact, all your B vitamins affect your nervous system. Make sure you're getting good sources of B vitamins. And here's some of the sources right here. Whole grains, genmai, not hakamai, potatoes, legumes, nuts, green leafy vegetables, good oat bran, whole wheat. These things are good sources of vitamin B3, niacin. Who is at a risk for B3 deficiency? Those people eating the hakamai and the white bread and the refined carbohydrates. You do not eat these things. Another thing your brain has to have for good brain health is your omega-3 fatty acids. Now, I don't speak in America very often, and so most countries I go to, they don't understand us, but I got Americans here. Where do most Americans think you need to get your omega-3s from? Fish oil, okay. What type of oil is omega-3? It's called an essential fatty acid. What does essential mean? Your body doesn't produce it, okay? We need all the fatty acids, but the body does not produce. It's same with the amino acids. You've got 8 essentials. The body doesn't make them. You got to get from an outside source. And so if it's essential, if omega-3 is essential for us, you know who also it's essential for? The fish. Fish do not produce omega-3s. So where does a fish get omega-3? Whatever plants are growing. Now, it might be a carnivorous fish, or it ate a herbivorous fish. And the herbivorous fish ate the plankton or the whatever it was, and it passed into their systems. But once you get the fish oil, because it collects in the oil, right, the fat. That's why we get, can you imagine squeezing the fish so you can take its oil? Well, the trouble is, fish are swimming right today in polluted oceans. Matter of fact, it must have been 18 years ago. I was in Tokyo somewhere, and a big article came out. Women who were pregnant, lactating, and had young children don't eat cold water fish. Don't let the child eat cold water fish. Don't you eat cold water fish because you're carrying a baby or you're nursing a baby. Why? Because the mercury levels are so high in your cold weather fish. So you don't mind a little bit of mercury in your body, do you? I sure do. I'm not going to have any. So we need to get some good sources of omega-3 fatty acids. Here's some of, and you don't try to write them all down. You can go on your computers too. Just look up good plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids. One of the best, chia, egoma, flaxseed. We talked about flaxseed last night. It's an omega-3. It's high fiber. It's anti-inflammatory. These are the things that we need to be getting into our bodies. Avocados. The month of November, I'm going to be in Bolivia. Mango trees everywhere. I'll be getting plenty of omega-3 fatty acids there. Blueberries. Yeah. There's enough out there in the plant kingdom that we get everything you need. Less age-related memory loss. This is the result of having omega-3s in our diet. We're going to have less age-related memory loss. less Alzheimer's disease. You don't want Alzheimer's disease. And as soon as you think you're starting having memory problems, whatever we said tonight, you start doing that thing. You can stop it. Unless it's being caused by a prion, then you should have stopped eating meat when you were born. Quicker brain. Your brain's going to function faster. It's going to function better with the omega-3 fatty acids. Less depression. All right, now there's another thing the brain has to have, and that's going to be vitamin E. These are all things that are brain foods. So vitamin E, reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease in old age, 45 to 54%. So now we're getting some percentages here. You start adding the percentages together, and we're getting to a point where it's a very small case, a chance that I'm going to get these diseases because I'm going to do everything right. So where are we going to find the vitamin E? Well, especially in red fruits and vegetables. Tomatoes, high in vitamin E. What else is tomatoes? If it's red, it's got a phytochemical called lycopene. What else is lycopene good for? The eyes. You having a problem with your eyes? You start taking anything with lutein in it. You would start getting those red things. Vitamin E sources. The thicker the sauce, the better. Thank you, Sister Bailey, for that wonderful spaghetti sauce the other night. I got my eyes taken care of. I left all my medication, my supplements up in the mainland. Kiwis, corn, nuts, great. Another thing the brain needs is magnesium. Now, all these things, don't go out and get in a bottle. One of the problems with getting all the supplements in the bottle is many of them contain a small amount of copper. Copper causes cholesterol to stick to your arteries. Also, copper affects your brain function. Get your vitamins, unless you have a known deficiency, from the sources that God put them in. So some sources right there. You notice some of the same sources as your vitamin B3, same one as your vitamin E. Bananas, spinach. I had a bowl of just spinach leaves today. Nothing on it but just spinach leaves, because it's got good, that's also omega-3 fatty acids. It's all good in magnesium. Another one that's very interesting is flossing your teeth every day. This is for your brain function. You've got more bacteria in your mouth than there are people on earth right now. You get these things. Matter of fact, you might notice sometimes if you're going to have some big time dental work or tooth pulled, you can have no infections in your mouth. If you have an abscess or something, they're going to give you antibiotics first because it can go down to your heart or go up to your brain. So basically, if we get that bacteria from between your teeth, but there's another way of doing it. How many have heard of a thing called oil pulling? Oil pulling. Matter of fact, I did it today. I do it sometimes when I'm at home, but I took a spoonful of your olive oil, and I'm glad you didn't come out, Sister Bailey, because I was sitting there. If you'd asked me a question, I would have made a mess. But when you're swishing oil, and I like coconut oil the best, you're swishing the oil in your mouth, it's pulling bacteria, and you do it for about 20 minutes. And then you spit it out. Don't swallow it, otherwise you just swallowed all that bacteria. You spit it out, and then you brush your teeth. It whitens your teeth. It gets rid of much of the bacteria in your mouth. It's very, very good. And this is, matter of fact, I was watching some lectures today on it from even dentists saying it really works. Some of them are saying, we still don't know yet. Well, because it's cutting into their back pockets. Blueberries. Finding that people who drink blueberry juice, very high in antioxidants, has an amazing result, very amazing effects on Alzheimer's disease. That was done at the University of Cincinnati, my hometown. Antioxidant, matter of fact, any fruit or vegetable juice is good for your brain, for your whole body. But antioxidants, we need to make sure we're getting plenty of antioxidants in our diet. That's why they say you should eat a rainbow of food every day. All those wonderful antioxidants with the phytochemicals that God put into our food. That's what your medicine is. It takes care of things called free radicals. And we have too many free radicals already in our bodies because of this crazy world we live in. Be careful with medications. Most medications will affect your brain. Non-prescription sleep aids affect your brain. If you're not sleeping well, what's the foundation principle of health from last night? The foundation principle? Reason from cause to effect. Why am I not sleeping well? And I'd ask you some questions. How much exercise do you get during the day? How late do you eat? You eating that big meal? You can't sleep in a big meal. What are you thinking about when you go to bed? What do you do for the hour or two before you went to bed? There's so many factors involving in our sleeping. We need to be able, matter of fact, what time do you go to bed? 9 o'clock. When you're in bed at night in the dark, your brain starts producing melatonin, which you'll use the next night to go to bed with. If you don't have it, go buy a bottle of the stuff and take, some milligrams or micrograms of melatonin. Blood pressure medications, profound effect upon the brain. Matter of fact, it's basically it's a two-way street. It's a deadly street both ways. If you don't take the blood pressure medication and you've got high blood pressure, now you've got your problem with high blood pressure. And when you have high blood pressure, it compresses the brain and makes your brain smaller. But now they're finding that the medications that we take for the brain, it also shrinks the brain. What type of disease is high blood pressure? It's a lifestyle disease. It's not really a disease. It's just it's a condition that we get into with the lives that we're living. And we can cure high blood pressure. It's not a disease. It's not something that's wrong in your body. Another interesting study, 260 elderly people, ages 65 to 90, they asked them to make 6 changes. First 3 all concern fats. Less free fats, less cholesterol, less saturated fats. I mean, just cut out the animals and the hard fats. And even the oils, they're not healthy anyway. They did those 3 things. Next 3 things, less fat. Well, that's where they did that. Get it out of there. Okay, I forgot I was all animated. Next one, more carbohydrates, more fiber, more vitamins and minerals. Short study at the end, people were healthier and their minds were much stronger from making 6 simple changes. Okay, it's 7:30. I'm supposed to give you a break. Let's go ahead and take a break, short break. I'll start in probably another 5 minutes because we're running out of time real fast. Well, I didn't get done with this program, but before we're done, all these things I'm not getting done will be added on because they all have something to do with everything else we're talking about. So let's take a break. Yes. your heart pumps. When you're feeling your pulse, you're feeling the pressure in the arteries. And the stronger your vascular system is, the less pressure's got to exert to get all these things through, past your blood pressure cuff, which is pushing on the brachial artery, on your humerus. So exercise, drinking enough water, no cholesterol in your diet, trying to get your arteries cleaned out very nicely, more sunshine, which dilates the blood vessels, reducing stress in your life, because stress, white clothes hyperthermia, hypertension. You've heard of white coat hypertension? Someone walks into the doctor's office, their blood pressure goes up, because there's the doctor, because he's going to do something painful, expensive, or give me some bad news. Those things are always in the back of your mind.
Did you say garlic also?
Garlic is good. Garlic is good and charcoal helps lower cholesterol. Both garlic and charcoal will lower your cholesterol. So these are good things. Also, garlic has a what we call an antiplatelet stickiness factor. So it keeps your platelets from sticking together so they flow easier.
That's the charcoal and garlic?
Well, that's the garlic, has antiplatelet stickiness factor. Charcoal can take cholesterol out of your body. What about it? Well, flaxseed. Well, okay, work for you. Yes. Yeah, sir.
I know you talked about exercise, and I see you talked about it today. Is all exercise created equal versus you have your lower, slower, maybe jogging, low impact?
All people aren't, we're all created equal in that sense, but we're not all able to do the same thing.
Yeah.
When I run, there's some people who can't keep up with me, and there's people I can't keep up with. And if I try, I'm going to die trying. But I'm not going to stay back and, one of these runs. That's not running, that's walking with your arms up. So basically, it's whatever you are capable of. Now,
You're doing the most you're capable of, because you could run slower. Would you choose to run, I guess?
I run as hard as I can
Okay.
without dying.
That's the goal.
But now there are types of exercise that are more beneficial than other types. Nordic walking is probably one of the best exercises if you're doing it right, because you got the poles, your forearms, your wrists, your biceps, your triceps, your deltoid, you got pectorals, everything's working because you're working this way. Otherwise, you're just walking and maybe swinging your arms. Not much exercise to swinging your arms. The legs are getting some exercise, your lungs. But Nordic walking is really, you look at these guys in the Nordic events in the Winter Olympics, these guys can do some amazing things on the skis. But they are well trained. They got to stop, take the rifle off, and shoot that little thing. You know what they can do? They can slow their heart down because they can control themselves. We need to control ourselves. Okay, data and privacy. Okay. Well, I'm going to just go in and start with mine, and the side on the right is going to be just English. But we talked last night about blue zones. And we talked last night about the Okinawa as being one of the blue zones. But there was a study done in Alameda County, California, by two scientists called Belloc and Breslow. And they came up with 7 ways to extend your lifespan. And frankly, when you extend your lifespan, you're also, if you're doing it right by lifestyle, not by medications, you're extending not only your life expectancy, but your healthy life expectancy. If you're doing it through medications, your healthy life expectancy is not being helped so much. You're controlling symptoms, but your disease is still there. If you've got high blood pressure, you're taking blood pressure medication, you're controlling the symptom, but you're not controlling the disease itself. Another thing with blood pressure is salt. That's going to hold water. Anyway, that's another thing. So anyway, we're going to go down the 7 longevity factors in Belloc and Breslow's study that will help you live longer. The first one is, and we've talked about it last night, your 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night. I stress sleep at night. Now, frankly, it's not a bad idea to take a short nap before lunch. I worked for Dr. Agatha Thrash for many years. I'd have a question, I'd walk in and she'd be stretched down in the middle of the floor. She gets tired, she laid down, 5-minute power nap, ready to go again. Never lay down after a meal. Yeah, that's when you like to, right? The siesta time. Just do an experiment when you go home. Get a little jar, fill it half full of water, put a little bit of oil on it. What's the oil do? No, it doesn't separate. It just lays on the top, right? Now put the lid on and shake the fire out of it. What's it look like now? It's cloudy because you fractured the fat. It's all in there. Now you sit the jar down and watch it. What happens? It starts to come back together again. You got a big blob. If you eat a high-fat meal, all right, your body, if you're moving, it's moving. It's little fat's getting into your bloodstream. It's moving around into your thoracic duct. It's going to be just fine. But if you lay down, it starts to collect in there. And pretty soon you got that big bolus of fat. And then you look at the watch and realize, I'm supposed to be at work right now. And you roll out of bed and you squeeze that tube and you put a big bolus of blood into your subclavian vein. And now you've got this, basically, you got this big ball of fat looking for a place to plug up. And here's what the study, 1947, the study said, a nap after a meal is just the lull before the cardiac storm. Yeah. All right. In America, we got a bad habit. I don't think they do it in Japan. I know you don't do it in Japan. Matter of fact, very few countries do daylight savings time. Crazy, crazy thing. Here's what they found out about daylight saving time. In the springtime, you set your watch up 1 hour, which means you get 1 less hour sleep that night. The next day, there'll be 8% more fatal automobile accidents from 1 hour. In the fall, we set the watches back 1 hour, extra hour of rest. The next day, 8% fewer fatal automobile accidents. That's just fatal automobile accidents. New York State did a study on that. They have 50 to 60% more accidents of all types in the springtime from that 1 lost hour of sleep. How often do you lose an hour of sleep? It can be death-defying. Okay, we work on what we call a circadian rhythm, circa, about, diem, day, about a 24-hour rhythm we work on. If we're working it right, we're going to bed around 9 o'clock at night. That's where we want to be. If we're doing that, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, we reach what's called the nadir. That's the lowest point of your body functions. Everything's going slow and low. You're sound asleep, you like it like this. But now, mid-morning, late morning, you get to the zenith. That's when you are keyed in and you are ready to go. Your mind's working, everything is working at peak efficiency. That's the way we were made. But what happens if we move the bedtime to midnight? What happens to the nadir and the zenith? They all move also. So now you reach your nadir in the middle of the morning. Ever been there? You just feel dead. So what do? A cup of coffee, a donut, some candy, something that will stimulate you, get some glucose in there really quick because you're dying. And then in the evening time, when you should be packing things away, getting ready to go to bed, now you're ready to go. Your eyes are wide open, and you cannot go to sleep at 9 o'clock. It's a habit we get into. Every hour of sleep before midnight is worth twice as much after midnight. Going to bed at 9 o'clock is a good time. Now, when you go to bed at 9 o'clock, in the dark, I stress in the dark, your body's producing more human growth hormone. What does that do? Human growth hormone slows down the aging process. So you go to bed early, you grow old slower. But as you get older, you produce less human growth hormone. So basically, as we're growing up, we grow up slowly. We realize that, but then pretty soon, boom, we're old, and we wonder what happened there. But if we're going to bed on time, and exercising, because the more we exercise in a daytime, the more human growth hormone we're going to be producing. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times, it's got to be dark in your bedroom. And just tonight, when you go in your bedroom, you turn out the lights, lay there with your eyes closed, and open the eyes and see how much light's in your room. That little light. If you got an Apple computer, there's this little light here that pulses. I've got to throw something over to keep me awake. All those little things, the dials on your light switches, that little amber light, those are not healthy for you. You should be covering them up. Okay, you need to have a comfortable bed. Very important to have a comfortable bed. And you need to have a regular time to go to that bed every night. You should go to bed at the same time every night, get up at the same time every morning. We work on a circadian rhythm. If you're having a hard time sleeping at night, look to see what you take to bed with you. Do you take your computer? You take your television? You got a book? You're eating in bed? Get rid of those things. Go to bed to go to bed. All right, a study was published in Chronobiology International looking at night lights and breast cancer risk. Those who live in a very dark environment, nighttime is going to be dark, have a relative risk of 1 of developing breast cancer. The more light you have, it gets up to increasing the risk by 22%, just having light in your room. We need to have it dark. We talked a little bit last night about driving tired or drunk. If a pilot is tired, you don't want to be on his airplane. If you've ever are a pilot, you know what this is. The most dangerous times in flying is 2 particular times: takeoff and landing. Matter of fact, that Ethiopian airline, it was in the first 6 minutes. It was problem with her, and I've read the whole report. I know what went wrong. They understand what went wrong. Of course, there was something wrong with the airplane too, but the pilot could not overcome it. And that's the most dangerous time. Well, they did a study. Matter of fact, if you go on any transatlantic or trans-Pacific flights, they'll have 2 whole crews of pilots. They have a place they go downstairs and rest. But here's what they found out. During the whole flight, the number of mistakes of guys who had taken a nap and were well rested, about 31 of these mistakes. Well, 34 says. Those who were tired, 120 mistakes. But when they're coming in for the landing, and that's the most critical time, those who were well rested, no mistakes, because you were really on top of your game. I know, I love to land, but you're really on top of your game. But those who were tired, 22 mistakes. Those can be fatal mistakes. Okay, first one was good night of rest. Second one is nothing between meals. We love those things between meals, don't we? Everything starts disappearing in the house. You go in an American office, the secretaries all have a jar of candy at the edge of their tables. You just walk by and you grab one, there's a coffee mess over there with donuts by it. People eat those things all day long. But our bodies, we talked about sleeping at the right time, our digestive system works on the schedule. It's got to have a time to rest. They did a study, I think this was with secretaries. They gave them a nice breakfast, and then they measured how long the food stayed in their stomach. And it was about the right period of time, about 4 hours. By then, it should be out of the stomach, and you go into what's called the interdigestive phase, 4 hours. All right? A couple days later, the same group of people, they gave them a nice breakfast. Mid-morning, they gave them a snack. Piece of pie, glass of milk, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They still had breakfast in their stomachs 6 to 9 hours later. Now it's starting to ferment. That's not a good thing. A few days later, same study, same group of people, same good breakfast, gave them a little bit of chocolate in the morning, a little bit of chocolate in the afternoon. They still had breakfast residue in their stomachs 13 hours later. They're producing alcohol at that point. Our bodies need rest. If we're constantly putting food into our stomachs, it's never going to get a break. It's never going to get a good rest. Oh, we got to poke it every time, I guess. Yeah. Bingo. And the fatter your food, the longer the food's going to stay in your stomach. Like that lovely tempura, it's going to stay in your stomach 5 to 6 hours. And you shouldn't have another meal until everything's out of your stomach. Okay, third longevity factor is eating a good breakfast. Most people don't have a good breakfast. They're in a hurry to get out of the house because they slept too late, because they went to bed too late. And then they get there at the office and they're all bagged out. What are they going to do? They can't stay awake. What are they going to do? They're going to get a Coca-Cola, they're going to get a cup of coffee, some sweet thing, and they're going to go through the entire morning with these things so they can just get through. And then they can't eat lunch because they've been eating all morning, so when they get home at night, that's when they're hungry. And that's the worst meal of the day. You don't need a whole lot of food at night. Sometimes it's overwhelmingly tempting, and sometimes you need it. Marco's been working all day in his exercise. He'll probably be eating lentils tonight. I'll watch him. I won't eat it because I had mine. I don't know what all that was. Yeah, stay away from the refined foods. All right, for those who ate breakfast and don't snack, this is an interesting study was done here. Those who eat a good breakfast had less than half the risk of death from all causes than those who snack and don't eat breakfast. That's all causes, not just heart disease, all causes just from eating breakfast and not snacking between meals. A good pattern for eating. We should eat breakfast like a king. That's the most important meal of the day. We should eat lunch like a prince. And if we eat it at all, we should eat supper like a pauper. That's the schedule, which basically means the best plan is a 2-meal plan with 18 hours in between. Some of the advantages of the 2-meal plan: better eyesight, better hearing, better intellect and memory, less allergies, things like asthma, things like arthritis. What is asthma and arthritis? Why would they have anything to do with a 2-meal plan? Asthma and arthritis are allergic reactions to something in the environment. Most of the time, it's allergic to foods. If you're eating less food, you're going to have less allergic reaction. Matter of fact, if you know someone with rheumatoid arthritis, 4 foods, get them off, well, 5 foods, we'll say 5 foods. Get them off of potatoes, white potatoes, eggplants, peppers, and, okay, I'm forgetting. Tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, and peppers, and milk. Because there's wild nightshades. If a cow eats that, you're going to get the nightshades. They're called nightshade foods. 10% of people completely cured of arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis, 25% will get improvement. Okay, more energy, more stamina, more endurance with the 2-meal plan, which is a pretty nice thing. Less obesity, which makes sense. Less osteoporosis, and there's a reason for that. We won't get into that. Less stress. Better control of diabetes. A diabetic needs 2 meals a day, not 5 meals a day. Less hypertension. 93% less cancerous tumors. Why would that be? All right, let's say we eat a meal. 7 o'clock, we're going to eat our meal. It's going to take 5 hours to get out of our stomachs, and now all of a sudden it's lunchtime, noon. So we're going to eat another meal. That's going to take 5 hours to get out of our stomachs. Now we're going to get home at 9 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, we're going to have another meal. Another 5 hours to get out of that stomach. So we got basically 15 hours of the day was involved in the process of breaking down protein, carbohydrates, and fats. A lot of energy is being used. If you are eating 2 meals a day, that means you're only using 10 hours. You've got 5 extra hours for that energy to be used in things like the immune system fighting disease. Any disease does better on a 2-meal plan. The body's got more time to work, and you just live longer in a 2-meal plan. Sir?
What's the example of your 2-meal plan, like when you eat the first meal versus?
When you eat the meal, all right, it's a good question. People always ask that question, and basically, when I'm home, that's not a problem. In a situation like yours, people who have an office job, when they say lunch is at 12:30, that's when your lunch is. So basically, you should have eaten 6 hours before that, so you got to move your whole day up and eating breakfast very early. My recommendation for people, of course, it's hard to get into the mind, make your main meal of the day your breakfast meal, make that your vegetable meal. You got your grains, you got your vegetables, you got your salad, and then your lunch is easy to have a good, whole-rounded lunch with fruit and grains. And then you just skip the supper. So basically, I like 6 to 7 hours between my meals. That's what I'm basically doing at your house. I'm eating after my run and I shower and everything is about 8 o'clock. I usually eat at 7, but 8 o'clock. Then I'm eating at about 2 or 3, my lunch. Okay, the next longevity factor that Belloc and Breslow came up with was maintaining a proper weight. So that's an important thing to have a proper weight. And it's not a major problem in Japan. Not a problem I've ever had either. But we got to maintain that proper weight. And there's ways that we can do that. There's a thing we have, if we are 10 pounds overweight, we're taking a year off of our lifespans. I don't know how many years that lady just took off of her lifespan, but that's not an uncommon sight in America. We got to get our weight under control. So we got to figure out our body mass index. Does anyone not know what a body mass index is? Most of us do. It's a pretty common thing nowadays. But often we know what our number is, but what is the best number? If you're below 18.5, you are considered underweight, which isn't the worst thing in the world either. If you're between 18.5 and 24.9, you are at the proper weight. Not a bad thing to be at. But it depends on how it's distributed also. 25 to 25.9, you are overweight. Get a handle on it. Get control of it. If you're over 30, really 30 to 39.9, you are obese. Over 40, you are what's called morbidly obese. I didn't have any of those people in there, but you don't see too many morbid obese people walking around the streets. Okay, 2 mice, brothers. They're brothers. You see the difference in the two, right? Probably rats. 2 rats, white rats. Well, the skinny rat, that was his diet right there. A whole food, plant-based diet. His brother, he's the one who liked to go to Mickey D's all the time and eat all that milk and cheese and meat and everything else. It's basically the diet that we're eating. But like I mentioned last night, a vegetarian diet can be very unhealthy. Are French fries vegetarian? How about potato chips? How about Coca-Cola? How about candy? Twinkies? That's all vegetarian. Cake, donuts. But the more of these things we add, basically you look in there, that's a total vegetarian diet that kid's on. And look what it did to his body. We need whole food, plant-based diet. Okay, next longevity factor was regular exercise. Notice I say regular exercise. We've got to do things on a regular basis. I mentioned one of the laws of health last night was regularity. And I said, if we're not regular, if we do not have a schedule, I'm going to exercise at this time, we'll never exercise because we never find the time to exercise. Right now, in Marco's place, I get up and I'm out there by hopefully 6 o'clock running. Got to get my run in and it makes me feel so much better the rest of the day. We just got to do it. I was working in London in the 1990s, and this billboard was all over the city. Heart disease, the early signs. You usually expect old people to have heart disease. Well, they do sometimes, but it begins there. You see the problem in the picture? Sedentary. And if you can see the picture clearer, in front of them is all junk foods on the floor. You begin building heart disease in childhood. Let me just mention something else while I'm thinking about it. I got a book a couple of years ago called Cholesterol, Coronaries, and Chlorine. They found that during the Korean War, they had a great, when soldiers were killed, they bring them in, do a little autopsy on them. They find almost all of them had carotid arteries. They had a lot of plaques in their arteries. And they finally in the studies, realizing that putting chlorine in the water to disinfect it causes cholesterol to stick to the inside of your arteries. We cannot have chlorine in our water. What was the first commercial use of chlorine? It was a poisonous gas in World War I, right? Chlorine gas. You had mustard gas and chlorine gas. Chlorine gas vaporizes at a much lower temperature than water does. Water vaporizes at, if it's centigrade, 100 degrees. Chlorine is much lower than that. So if you were taking a shower in chlorinated water, the chlorine is vaporizing and you're breathing chlorine gas like they did in World War I. So my recommendation is find some way to get rid of the chlorine. So we need to exercise. Now, I'm not talking about going out and starting pumping. You talked about the best type of exercise. You know, lifting weights is not something I'm going to do. I've got 3 compressed vertebrae. It wouldn't be too good for my back. What's the best type of exercise to do to build up the body? It's working with your own body. You look at these gymnasts. Do they lift weights? Only their own weights. They're only working with their body. And they've developed fine functioning muscles. But I mentioned before the Nordic walking. That's the type of walking that we should be doing. It exercises so much more. If we don't exercise, we're going to end up like this. How many have ever heard of hold the crook? Yeah, hold the crook. If you go to the top of Fujisan, which I've been there, there is a Shinto shrine with a plaque to hold the crook. She was the oldest woman ever to climb the mountain at 93. She started exercising in her 60s. She was falling apart. Everything hurt. She was sick all the time. And her husband, who was a doctor at Loma Linda, says, Hulda, go for a walk. She started walking every day. And then she started climbing. She was climbing mountains in her 90s. Loma Linda is very near the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California. She climbed to the top of 80 of those mountains, between 70 and 90. Pretty amazing lady. You want to die early? Follow the dog. We got to get ourselves moving. Some of the benefits of exercise in older adults. This guy is interesting. There's about 60,000 people in Japan over the age of 100. That's pretty impressive for your small population. He's the fastest of them who came out to race anyway. There might be one faster somewhere, but he started running at 90. He says he can still go a few more years. He set the record at 103. But some of the benefits of exercise for older adults, it improves cardiovascular function. We talked last night about collateral circulation. Now, hopefully the sound's turned off here because this thing's got a lot of sound to it. It helps build and strengthen your muscles. You get strong. Yeah, turn off the volume. There you go, thank you.
The 206 bones of the adult skeleton provide structure and protection.
I love these programs, but they talk.
The nervous system includes
Yeah. Strengthens the hip fractures from falls by increasing bone density, coordination, balance, and muscle strength. Bones need if you're not stressing your bones are going to get weak. The osteoblasts are going to quit working, the osteoclasts are going to take away bone structure, and you're going to be falling apart. Helps with arthritis. This is all about exercise. Helps fight depression. And it's not just for old people. Exercise is good for young people. Exercise is vital for everybody. Okay. The next, number 6 longevity factor is alcohol. Absolutely no need for alcohol in the human experience. It makes you do crazy things. I love to watch people in trains. This guy, he thought he was home and he took his clothes off and went to bed in the train of all things. Do you realize 12% of breast cancers are caused by alcohol? No alcohol. We don't need any of it. Breaks up families. My family was destroyed by alcohol. My father's an alcoholic. It's implicated in 50% of all fatal automobile accidents in America, and probably many other places too. We don't need alcohol. Then the last longevity factor is tobacco. When I was a smoker, I smoked Winston's and I went to Marlboros. That's a man's cigarette. And the big, matter of fact, that's one of the big ad campaigns that was about the cowboys. And come to Marlboro country, they would say. Well, after that ad campaign was over, a few years later, they went back to interview these cowboys, because they were real cowboys. They weren't actors, they were real cowboys. You know what they found out? They were all dead. Died of cancer, died of emphysema. So much for smoking. Cancer, premature aging. I just had an aunt 2 years ago die of emphysema. That is one terrible way to die. You can't exhale. You can inhale, but you don't have that lung capacity to push the air back out again. She smoked for probably 50 years. No, probably 60 years. So those were the 7 longevity factors. Now, what they did was, I thought was very interesting, is they made a chart now to see what's the impact of these longevity factors on people. So we're going to look at 2 groups of people, or two pairs. First one, we got some guy, he's 20 years old, probably lives in Harajuku, keeping 0 to 2 of the health factors. He's got to add, I don't have my glasses on, 14.3 years to his health age, which means basically he is 34.3 years old as far as his health is concerned. Now we got this other guy, he's 60 years old. He keeps all 7 of the health factors. He can take 16.4 years off of his health age. So now he's only 43.6. So here you got 2 people, 40 years apart in their chronological age, 9 years apart in their health age. But it gets even more interesting when you get the older ages. Here we got this guy, he probably lives in Harajuku somewhere too, 70 years old, keeping 0 to 2 of the health factors. He gets to add over 27 years to his health age. But we got this other person, 70 years old, keeping him all 70, he can take 18 plus years off of his health age. So he's basically 51.8. So two men, the same age, 45 years difference in their health ages. So the older you get, the bigger difference this is going to make. So those are the 7 longevity factors. Can you do the 7? We talked a little bit about 15 loss of health last night. Okay, any questions? I tried to make these programs shorter so I could answer questions, because people always have questions. So we got 9 minutes for questions. What? Oh, she's not catching up. Question? What? Yeah, breakfast was number 2. Yes, sir.
I have a question about weight.
Weight.
So according to BMI, I'm like 1 point over being obese. And so I've always had a problem with that chart.
Obese or overweight?
I'm overweight, definitely. But I'm like, when it goes to the gradient, is overweight, is obese. I'm like, at the end of overweight, almost obese.
Okay.
So
Yeah. You've got to take these numbers with a grain of salt, because basically what they're doing, they're looking at averages. Muscles weigh a lot more than fat. A person who's got much more muscle mass is going to weigh a whole lot more than people who have a lot of fat. That's why fat always floats on the top. So I wouldn't be overly concerned with that. You're a big guy, you're big boned, you got a big neck. They used to call me pencil neck. I get this little skinny neck. I'm a little skinny guy. So I'm always down there way, way well below where I'm in a comfortable zone. But I give a test for people, especially it's a good test for men. You stand up straight and you look down at your feet. If you can't see your feet, you got a problem, okay? If you got to do this to see your feet, that's a bigger thing. You can also do the waist-hip ratio. That's another important one. Your ratio, you got to have bigger hips and waist. That's another one. Chest circumference. There's other values you can take. But looking at you, I'd give anything to have what you have. I know, but wait till you get to be 50. You're going to find, if you're having struggles right now, at your age, I never had struggles. There's something happens in the 50s that something just springs out. And all of a sudden, you got those things they called love handles, which I never had before. And you got, I know I don't have much, but go to 2-meal plan. Whole food, plant-based, vegetarian diet. You'll get down to the diet you're supposed to be and get exercise every day. You do those things, you'll be at your weight. I mentioned averages. We look at averages. What is normal blood pressure? What is normal blood pressure? 120 over 80 is what people are going to say, right? Usually they're going to say normal is 120 over 80. Normal for who? Where'd they get that number from? They win the lottery or something? No, that number is an average of a bunch of people, and this is what number of people without a known disease, whatever it comes out. Your glucose is an average, your hemoglobin's an average. All these things are averages, and some of them are pretty spot on. When my blood pressure is 120 over 80, I'm stressed. Mine's more like 100 over 60. That's where I want it down there. Now, sometimes a person has low blood pressure. Clinical low blood pressure means when they stand up, they get dizzy. But don't treat the low blood pressure. It's being caused by some other problem. Main one being low functioning thyroid. So you work on the thyroid, not give the person caffeine to bring the blood pressure up. If you got low blood pressure, you get dizzy when you stand up slow, get your blood back up to your head, and go on about your business. You're going to live longer than a person with high blood pressure. Okay.
What are his thoughts on combining food with other food or eating fruit with veggies?
Okay, good question. Fruit, you said Combining foods, okay. You know, that's a question I get a lot, and here's the reality is, eating fruits with vegetables, that's a big one people ask about. You've got to know yourself. When I got out of the Marine Corps, and I bought a farm in Missouri, we had no money. I was told I had not retired from the Marine Corps, I just got out. I had no money. Our main meal was apples and potatoes. My wife would saute them together in water. Well, as a tuber and a fruit off of a tree, we thrived on that. It was a good meal. It was very healthy for us. Some people that eat a fruit and a vegetable, they feel it here. Don't do it then. My preference is vegetable meal and a fruit meal. But the bigger principle is having fewer items at a meal. Now, you say you can't eat protein with carbohydrates or whatever they're talking about. How can you get around it? I mean, a potato is protein and carbohydrate. You're going to sit there and, I'm going to cut all the protein out. Well, you can't do it. Foods basically contain all the elements. So my recommendation is have a small variety at a meal, cook it healthily, eat it properly, spend time chewing it, you're not going to have problems. One of our big problems, and those of you who've been through boot camp, get in, get it, and get out. You had to get that stuff down in and out in 10 minutes, and you had to eat a full meal. But that becomes a habit. My mother in World War II was a Marine. She was a Marine corporal. And she had to struggle with eating too fast too, a lot of her life. Because when you learn it in boot camp, you're going to keep it there. So it's our eating habits, not just what we eat, but how we eat. What do we chew our food? What is our mental state? Was there enough time since the last meal? We got to look at so many different factors to have a proper digestive system. Yes?
So if you're eating and essentially, like you're talking about the 2 meal plan, are you just keeping time, or when you feel hungry, you should have the next meal?
No. See, feeling hungry sort of defies the circadian rhythm that the body works on. We work on a rhythm. I mean, I feel hungry. I really don't feel hungry a whole lot. I get focused, but just because you feel hungry doesn't mean it's time to eat. If we need to live our lives by principle. Some people, they feel hungry, they eat. They feel hungry, they're going to eat some more, and they're going to go through the whole day like Tarzan swinging from vine to vine, from snack to snack to snack, and completely destroys the digestive system. So basically, you've got a time. My time's going to be breakfast at this time, lunch at this time, and if supper at this time. And you stick to that. Matter of fact, it's better to have a meal 5 minutes early than 5 minutes late. Now, very few of us are going to be that strict with ourselves. Do what's best for you. But what's best for you is giving your body a chance to rest. Okay.
Having been told that essentially snacking helps keep up your metabolism, or helps your body burn more.
Snacking helps it burn? Well, it's got to, because it keeps getting more and more glucose in there. Taking a cold bath increases your metabolism. So take a cold bath rather than eating a donut, okay? That's not going to hurt your digestive system. Yeah, taking a cold bath, because your body's got to now burn more fuel to try to warm your body up because you're sitting in cold water. You can increase your metabolism for a half hour to an hour just by drinking a half a liter of water. So there's plenty of good ways to increase metabolism. One is exercising more. The more you exercise, the more mitochondria, the more metabolism you're going to have going on. But mealtime it's got to be pretty rigid, if I can use the word, because right now, I cannot produce saliva because, I mean, you got your 6 salivary glands, 3 on each side. Right now, they are all the digestive enzymes is concentrated. But now tomorrow morning when I get done running, taking my shower, my body's going to start sending saliva, water there, and it's going to become reconstituted. So when I sit down to eat, I got plenty of saliva to be able to mix with my food, the enzymes to break down the carbohydrates, and I'm ready. If I put something in my mouth right now, I could probably choke it down, but it wouldn't have the enzymes it needs to break it down, so it's going to sit down there for a long time figuring out what to do with itself. And that is bad for your body. Yes?
How important is portion control, portion size?
Yeah, well, we had a young man come to UT Pines right now. He's a doctor now in Vanuatu, Mark Turnbull. But he got it in his mind, he decided how much are we supposed to eat? How much portion? So he's reading, the book of Exodus, and they said they gathered a certain rate of manna every day, an omer. And he figured out an omer, I think, was a quart. So he would have a quart jar, and he'd come to breakfast, and he was a big guy. He had a quart jar, so he'd fill it halfway full with breakfast. And that's what he'd eat. But he'd still be a little bit hungry, so he'd borrow a little bit from lunch and put it in there. And then at lunch, he didn't have as much, so he had less, but he borrowed some for the next morning's breakfast. And by a week, he was bankrupt, and he quit the program. Hirahachi Bu is the best way I can think about explaining it. We need to stop when we're still hungry, which is extremely hard to do when it's really, really good. I have found in many of the institutions, I'm going to be in Bolivia the month of November, you go into the cafeteria, there's a bowl with a plate on top. The food's already on it. That's your meal. You don't scoop your own out. That's it. And I've always found it's always enough. When I teach at Nash Dome in Ukraine, the meal's right there. It's your plate and your bowl. You take it, that's all you're getting. And it's always enough. We had a saying, your eyes are bigger than your belly. Our eyes are always bigger than our belly. I find that if I sit down for a meal and I take a portion, I sit and I eat it, that's all I need. As soon as I go back for a little bit more is when I'm going to start hurting myself. Trust yourself. Whatever you put on the plate the first time around is all you needed. Unless you really are out of control. And we had a young man come to UT Pines years ago. He was overweight from Birmingham, Alabama. He says, at last, I'm at UT Pines, total vegetarian meal, I will lose weight. He'd go in the cafeteria, he'd get a tray, but he wouldn't get a plate. He just put it on the tray. He just piled it on the tray, and it was like this. You can't lose weight that way. You got to have portion control, but portion control, you can eat more than I can eat because I'm just a little guy. Now, I could make myself eat more, but I'll suffer for it. You got to have sanctified reasoning, yes.
A friend of mine was talking recently about something called intermittent fasting.
Which kind?
Intermittent.
Intermittent fasting?
What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I don't know what that really means. I do intermittent fasting. I try to do 2 meals a day. I used to not eat on Sabbath morning. Some people will take 1 day a week out. And we're told basically missing 1 or 2 meals a week will do better than all the medications there are. If we give our body a rest, because the digestive process, Dr. Agatha Thrash used to explain it like this, the digestive process has all the power of a nuclear bomb. Well, it's not quite that much power, but you've got to break down every single particle of food. And that enzymes, the liver's making enzymes, your body's making enzymes, breaking it down. That's a huge amount of work. You take 1 meal and not do it, it does amazing things for your body. That's why the 2-meal plan really is a good plan. And when I talk with people after I've come back after a year or something, they say, I tried that 2-meal plan, it really works. But for some people, it's so hard because they go to work and there's no time to eat, or most of the places I've worked before UT Pines, you get a half hour for lunch. And in a boot camp, we can do that. That would be lavish lunch. But you can't eat enough, so you got to eat a late meal. And when you're young, you can do that, but you will pay the price. you will pay the piper. Yes, sir. Oh, no. Any other questions? We'll have question time tomorrow night also. If you have questions, write them down, get them in your mind so that we can just rattle them off. Yes? Okay, that's a good question for a growing boy. It is enough, but it might not be enough. For young people, 3 meals probably is a little bit more important than for his older people. But understand this. If we could get the victory over appetite, we could get the victory over every other problem that we deal with in our life, every other besetting sin, because appetite is such a strong one. That's why Daniel says, he purposed in his heart. We got a purpose in our heart. I'm going to do this now. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but it's really worth it. Thomas Parr, look it up on the internet. Thomas Parr, P-A-R-R. He was born in 1483. He died in 1635. Do the math. He lived during the reign of 10 kings and queens of England. One of the reasons for his longevity was he got married the first time at the age of 80. So basically 80 stress-free years. He got married the second time, I think, at 110. He fathered an illegitimate child at 130. He had to do penance in the churchyard in the stocks. But at 153, he was discovered by the Earl on whose land he had been working and his predecessors. And he took him to see King Charles I. He was the King of England at the time. And Charles thought, this guy's great. The guy'd been a farmer, a poor farmer, eating simple food his whole life, out in the sunshine, fresh air, drinking the water, eating simple food. Comes into the king's palace. And the king says, look, I want you to stay here because you've got the greatest stories. You don't have to work anymore. You can eat at my table. And he says, got you. So he enjoyed the king's food for 2 weeks, and he dropped dead. They did an autopsy on his body. 2 things. Open him up. This guy's got the digestive organs of a young man, but they were all extremely inflamed from the king's diet. There was a disease called the disease of royalty. You know what that disease was? Gout. Do you know what the treatment was? Send them out to work with the peasants. Live with the peasants. Eat simple food. Get in the sunshine and exercise, and the gout goes away. Because gout is caused by a buildup of uric acid crystals, usually beginning in the big toe. And I found a classic case of that sometime this year in Eastern Europe. And it starts working. It gets that. Those crystals get in between the joints, the articulating surfaces, and pretty soon you got that pain. You get on a simple diet. You drink water. It's going to dissolve. Going to be completely well. They'd send the princes and the princesses out to the farmers to work with to get rid of their gout. Simple treatment. Free. Okay, let's have a word of prayer and I'm going to let you go. Father in heaven, we're thankful for your love and mercies to us. Pray that you bless us now as we go our ways. May this be a time that we inspect our own lives and how we can do better presenting our bodies living sacrifices, holy, acceptable to you, which is our reasonable service. We thank you in Christ's name. Amen.